This comic book series was written by Tom King, a former federal public servant, has gone on to be a very well-regarded comic book author and grounds his stuff in a lot of very real issues, revenge and justice and reconciliation, all these things that show up frequently in his comic books where he has seen the consequences of not having accountability.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Former Feds and Friends. I'm Madeline Velturo.
I'm Wes Rist.
And I'm Jeff Sizemore.
And we all used to work together at the State Department, preventing atrocities and promoting peace and stability abroad. Now, we react to all things nerdy, wonky, and awesome for your entertainment pleasure. Normally, we break down films and shows that are already out, applying real-world lessons to fiction you love. But today, we are looking ahead. We're watching teasers for this year's most anticipated releases, unpacking the themes we expect to see, and asking you to help us choose our future guest experts. Jeff, what trailer will we be reacting to today?
We're going to be watching the Supergirl trailer.
Supergirl. Are you guys tracking Supergirl? You guys are more of the comic book folks than me.
I certainly loved how she showed up in the Superman movie. And so I'm excited to see, as this is ostensibly really what James Gunn's vision is for the DC universe. And so I'm planning on seeing it in theaters.
And I will be too. This is based off of, at least the rumors are that this is based off of Woman of Tomorrow, which is an excellent run in the comic book series of Supergirl and really added some new lore to the character and some depth to who she is, that has kind of become the norm for how Supergirl works now in comic books. So I'm really excited to see how this works. So
awesome. And I know almost nothing about Supergirl, but I did see Superman last year, and so I saw her kind of cameo in it with her doggy. So excited to watch the trailer.
You know, I'm just worried that you're not going to find your stride here if you keep going off-world all the time, Kara. I'm worried you're not going to find your people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Clark. I have no people. Home is wherever you are, buddy.
She's very different from her her cousin?
Honestly, I thought we were lucky. But luck always by definition runs out. What can I do?
The Brickens carry the antidote on that person. He has 3 days.
You cannot give up on me.
It feels like almost Guardians in the Galaxy 4. It is amazing stylistically with some of the kind of musical needle drop of some of the older songs, some of the visual cues. I was actually surprised that Gunn is not directing it. Goodness, does it feel of a piece with kind of his stylistic choices. It is not a Marvel DC crossover, but you can certainly see the fingerprints stylistically and choice-wise.
Stop. You're hurting my head.
Jason Momoa doing double duty.
Jason Momoa has been angling to be Lobo for over a decade. James Gunn told the story of when literally the day he got the job directing DC movies, Momoa sent him a text that just had a picture of Lobo. This has been his bid for a bit.
Is it a sidekick character?
No,
is it a villain character?
He is a bounty hunter. He can be hired for legitimate governmental authority purposes, but he also can be hired by straight up criminals. So it is this extrajudicial element that comes into play, which should be fun to examine once we actually get to watch the full movie.
There is no home without you, buddy.
From that dive bar.
Buddy, that's what I've been calling you.
Touche.
that this comic book series was written by Tom King, a former federal public servant.
That's amazing.
He
I did
worked in
not
the
know that.
intelligence community, has gone on to be a very well-regarded comic book author, and grounds his stuff in a lot of very real issues. And this comic book series, and I'm assuming from the trailer that the movie is about the same thing, is about revenge and justice and reconciliation and all these things that show up frequently in his comic books where he has seen the consequences of not having accountability.
She makes the comment in the trailer specifically, revenge is not going to make you whole. What justice looks like does matter, and does this perpetuate cycles of violence and things like that, which is obviously something that I immediately clinged to.
Yeah.
So has she survived like an atrocity, or has she survived a natural disaster? What happens to their homeworld?
Yeah, so how Krypton ended up destroyed changes in which version of Superman
Okay.
you are experiencing. It is always the planet blowing up, but
Okay.
sometimes the planet is blowing up from a natural disaster. Sometimes it's blowing up from like over extraction, and sometimes it's blowing up from weird science, and sometimes it's blowing up from like war machine propaganda kind of stuff. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the comic book series, it's a much darker reason as to why Krypton blew up than the normal generic, oh no, our world's, having a natural disaster kind of story we get from Superman.
She is clearly very traumatized. She is self-medicating, avoiding making new connections with people, making new emotional connections.
Her being a foil to Superman is always kind of super interesting, right? And the trauma that you're talking about is super important because Superman is sort of held up as this ideologically all-American in the biggest air quotes I can manage on whatever that means. And, he's the perfect guy who does right because it's deep in his core. There's not a whole lot of flaws or humanity kind of aspect to that. Whereas she's set up as incredibly powerful, but with a more complicated backstory and more complicated trauma and how she's managing that.
Because almost uniformly, her history is such that she was a teenager when she left Krypton right before it was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So she grew up in her culture with her parents and then was sent away at the same time as Kal-El, as Clark, but her ship goes off course, and so she ends up delayed. But that has a huge impact, as Jeff was saying. Like, her trauma is different. Like, Clark has trauma, but as Kal-El, he has no memory of Krypton. He was an infant. And so he knows John and Martha Kent for his entire growing up experience.
He was never forcibly wrested
She had an interrupted
from his community.
Yeah, she had an interrupted experience. She has trauma at a foundational moment in any person's development as a teenager.
Yeah, well, when you were saying too, where she grew up in her community, but she didn't grow up all the way, right? You said she was dislocated as an adolescent, which is very common in a lot of the contexts that we've looked at too, where people who are 16, 15, 14, even 12 years old are expected to act as adults, in part because they are wrested from whatever it is that's called their childhood. I agree that I find a character like what they're portraying, at least in the trailer, a bit more compelling than a character like Superman. And having worked with communities that have experienced this type of trauma too, like, people expect such perfection out of them, and it's so painful to watch them try and like navigate their trauma without ever getting angry, without ever, kind of giving into some of those tendencies, because that could mean the difference between them being accepted into the new communities or not, right? If you've been displaced, then you have to behave really well, right? Especially if you've been displaced and you don't have legal status in the country that you're in, like, you almost have to behave like Superman, right? You have to behave perfectly and be a good little boy. And so, yeah, so it's interesting to watch her reject that and watch her hopefully, it's not, she's a hero, right? Still be this hero, still be the protagonist.
It's interesting because Craig Gillespie, the guy who directed this, is the guy who directed both I, Tonya and Cruella, which are both very flawed female protagonists, both of them much more firmly on the villain side of the, if you're doing a binary.
Well, brainstorming what types of expertise, what types of people who have worked in public service, who have worked in foreign policy that might come up. I mean, we've talked about a lot of themes: trauma response, displacement, youth, right? That she's an adolescent. Yeah, revenge, justice.
I'm thinking one of our global local criminal justice colleagues. These are folks who have worked with these kinds of communities and how they seek restitution and how they seek kind of payback, if you want to boil it down, and have seen everything from like amnesty and, truth and reconciliation commissions all the way up to full-on trials with prosecutions with, severe criminal penalties.
And then I would say also anybody working that we know on the youth, peace, and security movement, specifically on kind of that nexus between how youth actors are not just victims, right? They are also active participants that have agency, that are part of the solution. There's a reason why it's Supergirl and not Superwoman. Like that specifically youth focus is included in there.
Yeah, we haven't had a youth peace and security expert on yet, in part because it was such a nascent part of the U.S. security foreign policy infrastructure that it didn't have its home yet. You had individuals, but they kind of were floating or they were starting to find homes. Then everyone was dislocated. But that doesn't mean they're not out there. And so, yeah, that's a great flag.
Thankfully, we have good Rolodex.
Yes.
We want to hear what you think. What do you expect from Supergirl? And more importantly, what kind of expert should we bring on for the full reaction when it's released? So let us know in the comments below. And while you're down there, drop this video a like if you want us to